All right. Good morning, Antonio. Your lighting is great.
Good
You look
morning.
good. How are you? I look taller than
I'm
you, but
good. I'm good.
it's great to
No,
see
we can fix that.
everybody.
There we go.
All right, let me.
Yeah.
All right, goodbye, music. All right, welcome to Pajama Sunday. I'm kind of in pajamas. I'm actually in my Tony Michaels, This Mike Kills Fascist hoodie. Kills Fascists hoodie, the Tony Michaels podcast, because
Oh wow, that's so
I
cool.
love his, I love this. This
Oh,
Mike,
that's awesome.
this Mike Kills Fascists. Yeah, it's a great one. It's a great one from the podcast.
Wow, that's
Well,
great merch. That
no
is great
shit.
merch.
I know, right? Well, let me say good morning, and then we've got a pretty heavy show. And let me tell you something. I've got, you know, I the first thing I want to talk about is, well, say hello to everybody. Let me say hello to everybody. I'm
Yeah.
all set up. It's been a morning for both of us. Tony's had a morning. I've had a morning. We probably need a little deep breathing with all of you, like, you know?
Woosah.
Yeah, right. Okay, let me say good morning to everybody. Alex, welcome. You're a moderator now. NBPT Rocks, he's going to learn. We're going to actually do a moderator meeting soon because we have 4 people that actually are moderators. So I'm just looking at all of you. Hi, Karen and Poppy and Kim and Illuminatus Primus, unless that is that you? I think I know who that is. And then there is Rollins and Chaz and Linda, and it's great. And John Glad. So everybody's joined us so far. It's you're starting.
It's such a great group.
We love. I know. I'm
Yeah.
thrilled, and I really love our Sunday shows. It's like a highlight of my month, twice a month. But today, let me just. Is my light good? Is my light good? All right. So today we're talking about Patagonia. I have been, well, it all started out, of course, because every time there's wildfires or extreme weather, of course I look at it and I go a little farther. But with Patagonia, a video had popped up in my feed, and it really pissed me off because every time a massive wildfire breaks out, what happens? The same shit. Before the smoke clears. I mean, before even anything happens, somebody's pointing a finger at some group, a political enemy, like the elite, like in Hawaii. It's always somebody that does this, like, okay,
Yeah.
they lit the match, but nobody's talking about, very few ever talk about the climate, the environment, why this happens, and then this bull crap just spreads. It spreads, but it spreads because it's easier to do all this finger pointing. It's easier to have all this anger at a group than it is to deal with what people still feel is the abstract of climate change, global warming, and it's like, climate crisis doesn't give you that person, doesn't give you that group to arrest, to vilify, to point fingers at, and it just gets me upset.
Well,
So,
we saw this
yeah,
with the Palisades fire,
yeah,
and that was a horrendous crisis in the United States and
horrendous.
California. And the proliferation of conspiracy theory, of anything that would redirect public attention away from accepting that background climatic conditions have changed around the world. So it's not
Yep.
even a question of, necessarily how one individual or particular fire starts, but the nature of the fire once it takes hold is often dynamically shaped by climate conditions, which are, of course, changing.
Absolutely.
Um, so with that,
Absolutely.
and with that said, and we know this, right? That as we're looking at the crisis of climate, it's not just an atmospheric crisis, which of course it is, but there's a whole sociological crisis of humanity in how do we respond, how do we conceptualize, how do we deal with, how do we analyze the risk that climate changes poses to us,
Yeah.
and throughout our history, anytime that something that was beyond our immediate control had happened to the populations. If you think about the bubonic plague, all the conspiracy theories that came up around dealing with the European crisis of the Black Death.
Oh, yeah.
Time again, but time and time, even just recently with the COVID-19 pandemic, all of the racial conspiracies and
Remember?
theories and scientific racism that proliferate in that moment. Oh, well, the Chinese are just dirtier than everyone else. Really,
Oh my
this was
God.
some of the rhetoric.
I know, I
So yeah.
remember.
So unfortunately, as we are going to be dealing with real-time crises that can only be explained through scientific rationalism, can only be conceived through scientific rationalism, empiricism, critical thought, for a population that's not engaged in those modes, they're going to have to use alternative descriptions of what's happening. And oftentimes that's very black and white, where the antagonist and the protagonist are clearly highlighted for the audience to see and to choose which is right and which is wrong. And it's a hyper simplified version of reality, and sometimes may be completely disconnected actually from the reality on the ground.
Sometimes it feels like more
And
than
oftentimes,
sometimes.
the success of conspiracy is not any individual fact that the conspiracy is composed of or individual lie. Its ability to narrate itself as a story. The more storied it is, the more it can pull in its audience. That's why in our own history, think more broadly, the things that stick with us the most are the stories, okay, of our childhood, the stories of movies, the stories of certain books. That's why in Western culture, if I say Peter Pan, everyone knows what I'm talking about.
Right.
Because these are the stories that stick with us. And so if a conspiracy theory can cloak itself in a story, it can become quite effective.
Yeah, effective and spread like wildfire. Well,
And spread like
yeah.
wildfire.
Okay, well, everybody that's joined, I have a video that I made. You know how I like to put together these videos, and this one it's a bunch of clips together. I think it's going to help us with the rest of the show. So I want you guys to sit tight, and I'm going to get this in here. And
in the south of our
yeah, it'll help. All my videos help, I think. And plus, we can still take our deep breaths in the background. We can watch with you, and then we're going to talk about all the issues that were brought up in the video. Okay, here we go.
in the south of our country, part of Chubuto, part of Los Lerces National Park, and part of Puen are burning. Where?
The fires came just 1 month after President Javier Milei rolled back land and forest laws, removing restrictions on changing land use after fires, a move the government said would boost production. But critics warn it could create dangerous incentives. And as fires grow more intense, scientists say climate change is making them harder to contain.
Are Israeli settlers burning down land to take it over in the Americas? Tonight's story takes us to Patagonia. It's not just a woke clothing brand. Actually, Patagonia, Argentina is a sparsely populated, resource-rich area at the southern tip of South America, and it's on fire. Over 37,000 acres have been charred just this week. About 3,000 local residents and tourists have been evacuated. Habitat has been destroyed. Land has been rendered almost worthless for the people who live subsistence lives off of that very land. One of the
When Patagonia catches fire, the same accusation always appears. Not against those really responsible, but against the Jews. A name is repeated as if it were proof of the Indigenous plan. Every time there are fires, crises or fears, this myth circulates again. It is said that it is not a coincidence that there is a secret Jewish plan to take over southern Argentina, but this story does not arise from documents, it arises from prejudice.
Thousands of people evacuated and firefighters fighting with very few resources because Milei's government criminally cut the budget for fighting the fires. The firefighters literally had to face the fire with something less than a teacher's salary.
Good morning. Can you tell me what you are doing, please?
We are throwing water here, putting it on the top of the fire, you see. What is here? And then I wanted to turn it around.
And with the chainsaw, what do? They have water on one side to prevent the fire from continuing to advance, and with the chainsaw?
No, I'm going to use the chainsaw to cut down the pine trees there to turn the truck, you see, just in case.
Oh, you opened the way for the truck? A little.
I turned the truck.
So I could turn the truck to advance or to go down.
Yes. And if the chainsaw ends up being up there, it won't go up there, it won't go up.
Were you higher up? How is the situation?
No, this sector was my first time here.
Yes. And where are you working from?
Pedregoso, Patriada, everywhere.
Very complicated.
Yes, very complicated.
How many days have you been here?
I've been on the river for...
Milei didn't send help, didn't travel to the area, and didn't even call the governor. He barely uploaded a fake photo of himself greeting a firefighter in the middle of a virtual fire. They say that terrorist Mapuche groups are the ones who set the fire, and they talk about environmental terrorism. If someone set Patagonia on fire, my law provided the lighter. Sorry.
Fire swept across southern Argentina. For days, wildfires raged through the Patagonian province of Chubut. By the weekend, authorities said nearly 12,000 hectares had burned. Tourists were reportedly forced to leave Puerto Patriada. Families near the town of Epuyén were moved out as flames closed in.
This moment, the fire extended from the mountain and crossed Route 40, putting Coyhue in danger. Are homes in danger? Yes, in the Coyhue area, but we understand people have already been evacuated.
The governor of Chubut said one of the largest fires may have been deliberately set. Prosecutors said evidence suggested an intentional origin, including fuel residue found near a primary access route. The claim was still under investigation, but judicial authorities in Chubut rejected that claim, citing a lack of evidence. This was not an isolated event. Fires were also active in Neuquén. Rio Negro and Santa Cruz said their fires were contained, but remained under emergency status.
All right, so that is a lot of stuff in that video that I took, but I put it together because it's illustrative of the shit that's all over the internet. There's some good stuff. It happens in every country. In Argentina, there is so much controversy over Milei because of the foreign policy, his libertarianism, his pledge to move the I think it's their embassy to Jerusalem, and him running around with the Israeli flag, but it fuels fire. It fuels the fire. It just does. I mean, but it's not that, because then you see that in Argentina forever, it's the indigenous people that are blamed. So we have to talk about the actual climate risks. And not just, and this is what people forget. And these claims, they don't ever really find evidence of this, and it's manufactured garbage. So I will let you take the stage now, Antonio.
It's really incredible to see what's happening, but social devolution was part of the climate crisis. Again, I would refer everyone back to the Age of Consequences. That's a very detailed outlook at what exactly the climate crisis is expected to look like over 3 different scenarios. So the idea that conspiracy theories would begin to run rampant, particularly at a time that the international consensus has largely been rejected, and I don't mean just rejected in voice, right? The United States has come out outright now in Trump 1 and in Trump 2,
Right.
getting out of the Paris Accords, of course. But also the fact that there has been little progress at the Conference of Parties each year on the issue of climate in and of itself shows that governments just aren't willing to take this crisis seriously. So you have a situation where governments aren't taking this seriously, and publics then are answering this question themselves. And the way that publics oftentimes do is, as I say, they gravitas towards storytelling. And storytelling is a much more effective tool and has been in our evolutionary history than scientific consensus. So that unfortunately gives the ability for conspiracy theorists to thrive in such an environment where you have real conspiracies from the business industry
Yeah.
on the issue of diluting the population on the issue of climate. And then you're allowed to have these less formal conspiracies take hold as well. But that also works in favor of the oil industry because as long as they're not being blamed for the climate crisis, they can continue to move full speed ahead. And by the way, look at what's now happening in Venezuela. So we see that there is an attack on the natural resources of South America by the colonial powers and by some of their own domestic lords. But this has always, as you say, been the history of Latin America. And oftentimes the most indigenous lay at the, unfortunately, the tail end of this extraction of the resources and even these conspiracies. Now, the Jewish conspiracy is very interesting. Of course, there are Jewish populations in Latin America. Oftentimes, Jews at the latter part of the colonial period, during the expeditions in Spain and what have you, went to the Americas, into Latin America. So Latin America does have a history of the Jews, and people ought to be aware of that. Right. And anytime there's a histories of peoples, minority peoples, there's also histories of oppression as well. So unfortunately, you see that there is sort of a foundational history too for such conspiracies to arise. But again, we have to be hyperclimate focused and conscious here. 2025, one of the warmest years in all of history, has just passed, reaching 1.45 degrees Celsius. So we're still hovering around the 1.5 degree mark. And that is the background conditions for why wildfires are able to take on these very hostile and violent natures and why they're so long-lived. That is the background context that we have to keep in mind as we look at these wildfires, whether they be in Patagonia, whether they be in California, or Siberia, Canada. I mean, it was only just a couple of years ago where we had Canadian wildfire smoke from Alberta so bad that it had blocked out conditions in New York. And even as far south as I was in North Carolina, we were having smoky days.
Well, I wanted to pull this up because although I'm trying to get it to fit the page. Okay, is it fitting? I think that's good. It's really good one, and it's from the Buenos Aires Times, and they are talking about exactly what we were just talking about, what I was trying to get in the video. Patagonia's wildfires become weapons of disinformation from the Mapoche. Scapegoating to an alleged Israeli plot, how conspiracy theories, false narratives, AI images, and political agendas distorted the truth behind the devastating blazes. And I thought it was a great article, not that we have to read the whole thing, but it just is illustrative. This one I thought was well done. They're talking about what we talked about. And then, it's indigenous people. To me, it's always like protesters or migrants or indigenous people or foreign agents, whatever. But this one said, even President Javier Milei. Now, some people pronounce it a little different. Milei has gotten into the act, going so far as to publish an image generated with artificial intelligence, in which he is seen holding the hand of a forest fire, despite not even setting foot there. He hasn't even been there. And so they talk about this. It's a tailor made explanation for every individual and their own biases. Fake news about fires ranging in the Chubut province and nearby regions spread in different formats: memes, images that mimic newspaper headlines, tweets written in supposedly revelatory tone, carrying eye-grabbing emojis. It's a phenomena typical of our times, but it takes on a different dimension when it becomes the language of officials or media stars. So then it just goes on to talk about all of this and how they're working in that country. It's, Argentina is not that much different because of every country with all this garbage going on. But I will let you guys read this for yourself, unless you have something to offer on this.
And also notice the role that AI is playing,
Yeah.
right? So as I talked about before, I'm not going to take too much time on this because you can go back and watch our other videos. But as I talked about before, that AI is going to reel its ugly head in a multitude of different ways in terms of making the climate crisis worse. There's that real physical way in terms of water and energy demands and amounts of pollution that these systems create, these AI data centers. But there's also the adding to the fact that it can create a proliferation of conspiracy theory and alternative facts and alternative reality. As AI increases, we're going to see that, people like Milei, people like Trump are going to use AI to their benefit and sort of warp reality.
Yeah.
And this ability is going to really, I think, affect already our ability to critically think and respond to the crisis. And this is actually not foreseen. You actually won't find anything like this in the Age of Consequences, because, of course, that's a 2007 document, and they did not foresee the impact of AI corroding critical thought pattern
Everything.
as well. So,
Even research, like I told you yesterday, how I the day before I did my own article getting, right? I sent you all those articles. And then because somebody challenged me and said, I don't understand AI because how can I talk about it if I don't use it? I sent you a bunch of articles that I got from AI, right? And then
yeah.
I realized I've been doing this for years with Jennifer. My research is actually better, and I would have gotten the same or even more in-depth articles than AI. So now I understand it, and I don't need it because I've been doing this for years. So I just wanted to add that because I had written that to you to tell you, look at the difference. And I can do the same thing. All right. I took a veer.
And unfortunately, some of us are starting to realize that AI tools are quite corrosive intellectually, but that's just in terms of a practical use of them. We're talking about here sophisticated propaganda.
Absolutely.
This is a sort of, to use a more deliberate term, mind control of the population. So this is something well beyond that. And the danger here is it can really disarm our ability to effectively think about ways of dealing with the climate crisis. Because if we're dealing with convincing people that Jews don't have a cabal to burn going into the ground, well, that's a lot of time. Then we're not going to spend talking about how we can reduce emissions, how we can protect natural lands and resources, how we can engage in habitat and ecological restoration.
It's
Instead, we're
distracting.
dealing.
I know, and it's such a distraction. I mean, it distracts from preventing and adapting to all this, and it's distracting from emergency response.
And it allows the real assailants to continue business as usual. So this is a very dynamic feedback in our human sociological system as well. And people, climate activists, advocates, what have you, have to become increasingly aware of all of these different dynamics at play that make responding to the crisis invariably more challenging. So it certainly is true that we're going to be dealing with a plethora of conspiracy theory. But again, the most important thing for us is that we have to understand the truth, right?
Yep.
The truth is that the global average temperature continues to warm exceedingly as global emissions continue to rise. Year on year, we're doing nearly 3 parts per million of CO2 concentration in the atmosphere each year. 2023, 2024, 2025 have been incredibly hot years, bumping in and around the 1.5 degree guardrail to above 1.5 degrees. And this is why we're experiencing, as stated from even the early days from the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change in the 90s, when they released their first assessment, in I believe 90, that of course, as the planet continues to warm, as the energy system becomes increasingly out of balance, we're going to see more frequent and more intense climate reactions, whether that be storms, droughts, heat waves, heat domes, wildfires, what have you. And this is exactly what the scientific consensus said would happen and is happening.
And when you one thing when you say, the real culprits, well, that's big business and governments. I mean, what's happening in Argentina, what I have is that law that actually made everybody paranoid because it is that the lands in Argentina that burn, that have fires, first there were prohibited uses. They weren't allowed to build or do any of that. And the modification that's happening now, which is also spurring a lot of stuff in Argentina, is that Milei, who is an idiot, would remove. They want to remove or they want to weaken all those fire restrictions. So that means that owners that own already could sell or change the land use. And that's going to even bring worse environmental degradation to the area. And this guy couldn't give a shit less. And that's why they're blaming the indigenous people down there. So this is his, he just doesn't care. They really want to make this happen.
And we've seen moves like this,
Yeah.
not only in Argentina and Chile, but we've also seen moves like this under Jair Bolsonaro in Brazil.
Yes.
So this is not at all unfamiliar. And it's so sad because, we really are now facing a real global crisis, that the global average temperature, ocean temperatures, sea surface temperatures, surface temperatures are rising quite dramatically. It's kind of absolutely phenomenal to believe that just in 2007, when the IPCC released its fourth assessment, that the worst case scenario was something like between 2 to 3 degrees by the end of the century, with most likely 1 degrees by the end of the century. That's how the IPCC in 2007 thought about the crisis. And we are at 1.5, bumping up against 1.6.
Yeah. And I think we
already in 2025.
1.7. And the warmest 3 years, and this government had NASA's documenting what they're doing, but not mentioning anything about climate change at all. NASA. They have been subverted. They've been
and we've
taken
seen that
over.
here.
Yep.
And so what's happening in Argentina, by the way, is they're also following the same playbook that's happening in radical Republican Americans here in the United States.
They are, because it's deregulation, privatization. What else, Antonio? Land, everything, building.
Right. And so this is a all hands on deck moment for the species. We are moving at full speed ahead. Global emissions around the world continue to rise. And again, almost no countries are in compliance with their 2015 national pledges at the Paris Accords. So I think that it's a very sobering moment for all of us that, yes, these are some of the worst actors. And we're at a time where global leadership has been decapitated. Look at what's happening in Greenland. And we do have to talk about this because, of course, there's huge climate dimensions. But right now, I don't know how much of our audience is international, but right now, this is the United States. This is the United States. I believe it was January 19th. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's the 18th.
It's 18th. It's okay.
Yeah. 2026. And Germany, the United Kingdom, France, Norway, and a host of other EU powers are now mobilizing to Greenland in defense against the United States, terrorism, military provocation, or possible invasion. This is absolutely incredible. Like I say, the social dimensions to this crisis well exceed, in some ways, the exponentiation of the physical climate crisis itself. We didn't expect this level of breakdown amongst allied countries, this level of nationalistic entrenchment until deeper into the scenario. Yet we're seeing it today. And the reason why it has a climate dimension is because as Greenland continues to rapidly decrease in its ice, its cryosphere continues to decrease, more and more resources are going to be available for imperial powers to pillage. And the United States is making an aggressive move because, of course, it has the most sophisticated climate data in the world. So it knows that Greenland has a store of resources and that increasingly as the cryosphere in Greenland disintegrates, that would become more accessible to the Americans to the point that they're willing to threaten an international war, a World War III scenario to maintain those resources.
It's bizarre. Just bizarre.
Well, it's not bizarre. This is so dangerous.
Yes.
We are on the side of the evil empire. We are leading the world in denying that climate change is happening, and we're also leading the world in reaping the benefits, or I should just say the exposure of resources that climate change is causing. I don't think that that's necessarily beneficial because as we, of course, extract those resources, we'll pollute those environments, and we'll also be polluting the atmosphere as well. So pristine land in the Great Greenland is now going to be under great threat, first from military barrage, and then second from resource extraction. So this is serious, and that's the same thing that's happening in Argentina. That's the same thing that's happening in Brazil with their binomes down there. The binome systems are a lot more complex because there's a lot more ecology in South America, but the same thing is happening to Greenland as well. So what the imperial powers are deciding is we're going to be divvying up the world and its resources. We won't be responding to the quote unquote climate crisis. We'll be reaping whatever benefits lie ahead. So, for a long time, we've been concerned about, for example, the East Siberian Arctic shelf releasing huge stores of methane into the atmosphere. Well, that's not going to be a concern for the United States government. That just means it's going to be easier to mine those resources and use those hydrates for fuels. So this is the worst case scenario because not only do you have a government that's completely non-compliant, it's a government that actually weaponizes the scientific data to extract more resources in the wake of climate change. And because the United States has this sort of hostile, absolutely aggressive positioning, it's encouraging other countries to follow suit in their own spheres of influence.
Like what's happening down in Patagonia. I mean, they see that the glaciers are gone. I mean, it is that serious. But yet this leader is such a he's actually crazy. But we had to give
Yeah.
we had they can't fight the fires. They want to point the fingers and at everybody except themselves. And they and it I'm sorry. It's driving me crazy because Patagonia is a beautiful ecosystem. It is
Absolutely.
so beautiful and the indigenous people that live there are fighting so hard. Why would they start the fires themselves? Why? It
Over
doesn't.
52,000 hectares burned. I
Yes.
mean, this is, these are questions. It seems so nonsensical. The idea that the indigenous would, but this is actually, our Department of Homeland Security in the United States proudly boasts Manifest Destiny on their homepage. This is a history of blaming the natives themselves, that the natives are committing their own genocide. The
Yeah.
natives voluntarily moved into reservations. This is a story that goes back to the histories of the Americas. And this is, unfortunately, you would think that with such a close relation, because, Argentinian people, we're describing a different set, like indigenous between and people who are national Argentinians and indigenous Argentinians.
Hmm.
But these populations are in themselves, for the most part, both indigenous to Argentina. The national population, it does have more European and African ancestry because of what happened during the colonial period, but these are native Argentinians, and that's why it's particularly perverse to see that one group of Argentinians who become more industrialized, who become more part of the global economic system, they just have, on the whole, so much less respect for native Argentina, and it doesn't look at all that dissimilar from how really white Europeans saw America when they arrived on these shores in the 1600s and the 1500s. So it's really sad. The wildfires will continue to burn in Patagonia. Unfortunately, Patagonia fire forest resources are not nearly as developed as they are in California, for example.
No.
And so they just don't have the ability to respond, which means that very fragile ecosystems in the Patagonia are likely to be exposed to the threat of wildfire.
Absolutely.
And that's a horrible thing. And you also don't have a government that is working systematically and strategically to get these wildfires under control. As you saw, that firefighters had to on their own freelance move in and help and volunteer. So you don't have the sort of coordinated response that would be necessary dealing with fires like this if you're really trying to urgently protect Patagonia land.
No, he didn't do that. He has not. But what really gets me is the biodiversity there. And so much of it is lost. It really is. And these Andean Patagonia forests, they are so slow. And think about the cypress trees. It hurts me. I can't help but make faces and
Well,
pain and pain.
this is what and I had to talk to a friend about this who's liberal but didn't really understand the climate crisis. And I did it from a paleological perspective. 55 million years ago, during the PETM, Paleocene Eocene Thermo Maximum, the global average temperature likely rose between 5 and 8 degrees Celsius over a period of 500,000 years. It took 20,000 years of carbon emissions and likely a few centuries, maybe or so of high emissions. The peak emission rate during the PETM
Right.
was one ppm a year. Okay, over the course of centuries to even thousands of years. We're doing 3
Yep.
ppm a year in 200 years, 100 years, 75 years, something like that, some range like that.
Yeah.
So the scale is not even comprehensible. And during the PETM, 85 to 90% of all life went extinct. We're doing that, but super fast forward. So we're seeing dynamic changes in the way that the Earth ecological systems are responding to atmospheric conditions. And under the previous set of atmospheric conditions, the interglacial period known as the Holocene, we were able to allow the Amazon, the Patagonia, the rainforests of South America to grow and flourish in great diversity, greater than actually almost anywhere else in the world. And those conditions are now somewhere gone in the past. Geologically, even though there's only been 200 years since industrialism has begun, in terms of the atmosphere, we've moved ourselves 3 million years into the future. So
I need a breath.
So 3 million years into a warmer future, it is very likely if you had some sort of time machine, you could just zoom into what 3 million years into a warmer future would be like. All of South America is likely a large desert. And so what has to happen is that the current landmass has to catch up to the change that we've done to the atmosphere. And part of that's going to be these large-scale wildfires. Obviously, wildfires have an incredible ability to revert the land to a desert state with very low diversity. And then notice what happens too. It's not just the fires.
No.
Because what's going to happen is that rain will move in at some point. But because the fires are so large scale and widespread, frequent and intense, that the vegetation doesn't have the ability to protect the soil from these greater downpours of rain.
Right. It's
And so
degrading.
now the topsoil is washing away, is becoming increasingly degraded, and you have a sort of desertification that begins in these heavily forested areas. You know, so that is the crises that all forests right now. Not just in South America, we see this with the forest in Siberia. We see this with the boreal forest in North America. Unfortunately, what we need to be doing instead is developing international fire response teams where the world works together, building huge, instead of militaries, it's almost like a military, but just the fire equipment, firemen resources. And they're able to have different command centers around the planet and mobilize regionally to these wildfires to maintain them, either in terms of forest management or directly battle these fires. We're going to increasingly need that because as we don't fight these fires, they also are obviously major contributors in terms of feedback to the warming climate.
Sure. And Argentina is an example just in itself that historically they have not put a lot of allocations towards prevention. They didn't. And it's sad, you know, it's sad.
If we want to save these resources, the time is now that we have to think strategically, long-term, and start working together. Because the 2020s are almost over. And as we enter into the 2030s, the science is clear that the warming will continue to accelerate. And we really don't know. Our species has never been beyond 2 degrees Celsius on a global average in our modern history, not just in our civilization, but as a species. So as we go beyond 2 degrees, and we most certainly will, we're already hitting up against 1.6. We're really talking about a planet that's never been known to us before. And so if we want any chance to maintain our habitability, we really have to start thinking about ourselves in a trans-border sense, that we're really going to have to start cooperating in defense of different habitats around the planet altogether, not just our forests, not just our coral reefs, not just our glaciers, but every ecosystem around the planet, because it is necessary to have these systems robustly intact in order to defend and mitigate against some of the worst excesses of climate change. And also, and so the more that we're able to keep these biodiverse centers alive and robust, the better we're going to be able to restore the planet in the long term. But as we degrade these ecological systems, as we continue to pollute the climate, and the planet continues to warm, we're going to see a rapid degradation and even system collapse of many of these systems.
And in to get back to Patagonia, I pulled up a quote from Thomas Kinsberger, who's a professor of ecology, National University of Comahue, Bariloche, Argentina, and he says, "We are witnessing a 50-year-long trend in drying and in warming. We are experiencing hot spells. We are experiencing thunderstorms, which were not very common in this region in the past, and of course, very large fires in recent times." So that's what you are. We're just drilling down to Patagonia, but we are witnessing all of this, and it is.
And the thunderstorm dynamic is very, very, very interesting, because when we think about changes in climate, we don't necessarily think about particulars like that, but think about that. You're in an area where you're facing historic drought. Rain is not coming available. When it does in deluge. And oftentimes when storm clouds do appear, they produce no rain but thunder and lightning. And those, of course, can be fire starters themselves. And so notice as these areas face increasing climate change, we don't know exactly how each area will respond, but we see that these are other modes that can lead to that transition into the other state, into the desertification state. Yes, getting thunder clouds, but not actually getting the storm. Instead, getting the lightning strikes and producing fire when you thought there ought to be rain. And we also saw this with Australia. In 24, some of the fires in Australia were so fierce that they were generating their own thunderstorm systems, and it was literally like something out of the book of Revelations. You saw this scene of wildfire smoke as far as the eye can see, thick, and at the base, blazing fire, and then thunderbolts stabbing the ground as fire trucks are racing toward the fire. I mean, literally just something out of a Hollywood movie. And then, of course, as these thunder strikes are striking the ground, more fires would begin in the distance. And of course, so many firemen have lost their lives in these crises. So it really is a dynamic situation that can have beautiful landscapes that we've taken for granted, that we've known to be rainforests for the entirety of our human civilization, can be reverted to desert within a generation. And this is what that process looks like.
And this Kitzberger, he says, we really have to assume that the conditions of the future are going to be different. We cannot have the romantic idea of going back to our 19th century landscape because it's a romantic view, which is not going to be very resilient to future conditions. And I will have these things in the show notes because I thought this one was really good. And he was spot on everything he said. He says, under the new climate scenarios, the forests will burn more frequently if the ignition's there. The ignition is there now because there's more people. And like you were talking about, Antonio, the lightning. So these conditions. But I also like when you talk about the things that we need to do to battle this. And it's going to be different. If we did not put all this
we need
money,
to go well beyond the Paris Accords. The Paris Accords are they would be an elementary layer here. Of course, we should be getting emissions down, but now we need to develop quick and rapid response teams to these crises around the world.
Absolutely.
We need system detections when there are going to be large-scale changes in atmospheric or temperature conditions. This is the sort of robust, I think about Dr. James White, the director of the Alpine Arctic Research Center, Colorado Boulder, who talked about a rapid development system where we'd be able to detect large-scale changes in ecosystems, whether it be drastic swings in temperature, deluges of water, widespread fires. These are the sort of systems that we need to work around the world to develop to protect ecosystems, to protect human lives. And absolutely, as the human and natural interface begin to blur, the urban interface with the natural interface, you're going to see a lot more fire starters, not necessarily on purpose, but just because human industrial activity demands combustion. You'll see that this will happen. And think about P&G, electric company in California. How many times did down lines from tree branches cause fires?
Sure.
Or windstorms cause fires? We're going to see things like that proliferate a lot more in lesser developed societies. So absolutely, we should expect that the background climate conditions are changing and changing extremely fast. I've been warning people and will continue to warn people that the 2020s is the last of the twilight zone. This is the last of anything that will resemble the climate from the 20th century and the 19th century. I'm a historian. I think about the naturalists or the romanticists who talked about the beautiful American countryside, Emerson, Waldo, and I think about all of that's gone. That is gone. We are moving into a system where we are going to be fighting to maintain our habitability everywhere on this planet. And also, we're going to be fighting like hell for all the other species on this planet because they have every single right to be here, and we desperately need them to be here. And so this is, again, an all-hands-on-deck moment. We need to be working together, of course, not just to limit carbon emission. We need to be working together to make sure that we have natural preserves over different areas, ecosystems around the world, and we need rapid response teams, whether it be to these delusions from extreme weather events. Talked about the people in the Philippines who have been facing extreme hurricanes that can only be described as Category 6 cyclones, typhoons in that part of the world. And these out-of-control wildfires that have attacked North America, have attacked South America, have attacked Siberia. We've seen these deluges across the European Union, even here in the United States, huge rainstorms.
Oh, sure. Look what just happened in California. I mean, where Elliot Jacobson lives and in Altadena, where Kevin from Black Bear News lost his home. Wow. He lost his home and all the burn scars and all. I have one thing I do want to say about all this. With all of the resources we have, what is happening militarily? We are funding ICE. We are funding these ICE thugs and these supposedly immigration Gestapo to go out in the streets and terrorize Americans when we need to. The mobilization, you would think, would be first responders and mitigate adaptation. I don't know even if it's too late to mitigate to any of these things. People are trying, of course. There'll always be those that do. Do you think there's going to come a time, Antonio, when the realization of holy shit, this is happening all over all the time? What is it going to take? Mar-a-Lago getting blown away? I mean, what is it going to take in the United States
Well,
anyway?
Donald Trump, first of all, Sandy, we got to evolve beyond that. Donald Trump is very aware of the climate crisis. He believes in climate change. He understands the threat that climate change poses to human infrastructure. This is a man who has spent now hundreds of millions of dollars in insurance costs and things of that nature, protecting his own properties and his friends' properties around the world.
Yeah, like in Scotland.
Expensive, right? These expensive resorts and golf courses and things of this nature. He completely understands. We got to get past that. What these people see is an opportunity to make plenty of money off of the end of the world. And we have to realize that that sort of thinking is not only dangerous, it's a sort of suicide, okay? And I know that that's very explicit language, but we have to understand that. If you're going to sit there and watch and understand with explicit scientific detail that the planet is rapidly degrading in the face of climate, and you're going to make it worse because you can make a lot of money, because you know that you're not going to live that long. Donald Trump is halfway out already.
Yeah, it sure is.
His health isn't well. And so these people who are in their 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, making a lot of money, controlling the global systems and these institutions, for them, they think, well, what is, it's supposed to be really bad by 2100. Well, by 2100, I'll be done.
Yeah, but what about a guy? But what about a guy like Stephen Miller? I'm going to tell you my theory about Stephen Miller. I think Stephen Miller I am not a therapist. I have a degree in psychology, but I think he's a schizophrenic with paranoid presentation. I honestly do. And I wish that people would maybe look at the pathology in that guy, who is going to be around a lot longer than Orange Turd.
Well, there's no doubt that Stephen Miller will use the climate crisis. Listen, there's going to be an emergency that's declared, okay? Ideally, it would have been the sort of AOC, Bernie Sanders climate emergency where we go Green New Deal all out. Or there's going to be a martial law, fascist, Jim Crow style, Hitler-esque concentration camp, mass deportation, militarized police emergency. But populations are going to have to get under control. And as the system continues to get whacked by the climate system, and that's going to show up in a myriad of different ways, not just the physical disasters that we're seeing that seem to be really impressive on TV. A lot of this is going to be really boring, like food prices. But food prices,
they're not so boring when you're at the store, but I hate going.
Right, I was going to say, that's not that boring when you're actually at the store.
I hate going to the store.
I know the store, that will be one of the untold stories of the climate crisis, is the penny grabbing at the store. And that is how one climate sign is going to show to us, because of course the ability, agricultural industrial civilization is based on the ability to grow food at scale. But the only way we can grow food at scale is assuming that the climate is stable. So as the climate destabilizes, the ability to grow food at scale will reduce. Now, of course, poor countries that are far off and away, we'll just let them starve and pretend like we don't know what's going on. But in the United States, what we'll be doing is spending increasingly more and more of our incomes on food at the grocery store. So don't think about this as just a pandemic-related crisis. This is actually not a crisis in terms of food costs that will actually, in my belief, I don't think that food costs on the whole are going to go down for a sustained period of time ever again. I think that we will be looking at increasingly rising food costs across the industrialized societies for the rest of the time that any of us are here on this planet.
I agree with you. I think, and the same thing with everybody screaming all about gas prices, which I know we have to travel. I know that a lot of us have to go to work. A lot of us are in the system. A lot of us have no choice. We try our best to lower our consumption. We try our best, but in this system, in this time, it is not always possible. So everybody, I have the luxury of never having to go anywhere. I don't go out much. And so when I see the gas prices higher, I'm kind of like saying, oh, okay, cheering it on a little bit, because that's less consumption for people to then just joyride, which I know people don't do it. Like when I was a kid, we went riding around in hot rods. Was a thing to
that's such
do.
a small issue now.
Yeah.
I mean, you have a data center that'll get thrown up down the street that'll
Yeah.
do 100 years
Way
worth of
more.
fuel day riding within a few
Way
days.
more. No
Um,
shit.
so this is unfortunately an exponential problem that we are having, and like I say, it's an all hands on deck moment because we're running out of time where the actual physical damages of climate change are not so excessive that we only have to worry about them, that they'll take up all of our main priorities. Right now, we still have time to do things to mitigate and to work on adaptation instead of just response. And we ought to take that time, as should have taken it over the last 30, 40, 50 years now, to start doing that. But unfortunately, I think you're right. More Americans are going to have to, and more global citizens, unfortunately, are going to have to feel like the people of the Philippines. There are some places around the world that are already there where they realize serious questions on the continuity of their ability to live where they are genuinely being asked. And countries that live, or people that live in countries that are low lining around the
The low
world,
line.
they're genuinely asking these questions. Are we going to be here in 10, 15, 20 years?
Well,
And those are very salient questions.
Robert says even today, the shift of the Hadley cells in our planet's atmosphere is the source of severe atmospheric events. So there's the physics and the science that most people don't understand, but our people do.
Yeah, I mean, and look, I was just watching a video today of damage from Hurricane Helene still in North Carolina, of course. There are so many rural areas in the mountains of North Carolina, and I said this almost a year ago when this happened, that it's going to be a decade or more before. But honestly, that in of itself isn't realistic, because we're going to continue to witness and see horrific events hit not only the mountains of North Carolina, but all over the United States, and increasingly resources. And as we've seen under the Trump administration, will be diverted away from places that have been hard hit. In North Carolina, it's been very difficult for us to get the funding that we
Yep.
need, the federal funding that we needed in order to bring people back, to make people whole again. And we're going to see those type of federal financing crises play out again and again.
Yeah, we'll get
as
this
the
from Donald Trump like he did to that other guy. Sorry, I didn't
Well,
mean
or
to
the same
interrupt.
thing. Well, think about what happened when Hurricane Maria, this is back in 2017, came through and devastated Puerto Rico, a territory of the United States, and President Trump at the time came out and threw paper towels at
Yeah, I
people.
remember that.
That's the sort of seriousness, and that tells you all you need to know about how serious that certain leaders are taking the climate crisis. They understand that this is an opportunity to make immense amounts of money, so much so that the Trump administration is ready to go to war over the Greenland crisis. We're seeing what's happening in Argentina with the complete devastation of a lot of the forest resources there, the removal of legislation that protects indigenous and native lands and very important, sophisticated ecosystems. We saw the same thing in Brazil under Jair Bolsonaro. And unfortunately, I think that these are trends that will continue into the future. And unfortunately, as these trends do continue, they'll continue to weaken planetary life support systems at a time that they're already being greatly degraded by the ongoing climate crisis.
Absolutely. And the billionaire class is just going to continue giving everybody else the finger because it's now this sounds like a conspiracy, but they hate us. They hate us. They hate
Well, it's between hate and gross indifference. They just
gross
many of them, if they don't
indifference.
hate us, they're grossly indifferent toward us. They only see us as their servant or slave class. I mean, we've had multiple billionaires in the United States. I forget the name of the one guy. Was it Peter Thiel, who said that he wasn't sure if the human species should
Yes,
continue to exist?
yes,
I
Peter
mean,
Thiel.
right. So these are people who aren't interested in humanity at large. They're interested in their own pet projects, right? And they're going to achieve those projects regardless of what's happening to you or me, or what's happening in Patagonia, what's happening in the Amazon, what's happening in the boreal forest or in Siberia. That's just not their concern. It's not their concern until maybe fires are rushing up against their data centers. Then it's their concern, right? Um, but that's not the sort of world reactionary crises response that we want, where we move back into a sort of 19th century mode where fire departments, that we have private fire brigades that protect data centers before they do neighborhoods or forests or things like that. But I'm also afraid from what we saw in California that that's exactly the world that we're going to be moving into, where private forces have their own fire brigades, taking away
Yep.
from public resources to protect things that in the whole aren't that important, even if they are very costly infrastructures like data
It's
centers.
the whole move to privatization, which is what the conservatives, the right wing, MAGA, all of them have wanted forever since Reagan. Privatize everything. Forget about any governmental services. Although I think we're going to be watching New York City as a test case now, a new test case for some progressive policies. We'll see.
Yeah.
We'll see.
And
I
I'm
mean, it
very
would.
excited about Zoran Mandani.
Me too.
And I'll tell you that if we get more progressive leaders like Zoran, we get more progressive leaders like Bernie and AOC, I think that there is a good chance that at least in the United States, and I think the United States position is important because if this is, people used to say the soft power of leadership isn't that important. No, it is incredibly important. If the United States leads on this issue, it will make anyone else who going in the opposite direction, like Malay, like Jair Bolsonaro in Spain, or excuse me, in Brazil, it will make these sort of leaders look like pariahs. Okay. And that way, the international community can come down with force and legitimacy and say, if you're not going to protect our lands, we are going to go after you internationally. We will cut you off from the international community. We will sanction you until you are in compliance with protecting indigenous populations' rights, until you are in compliance with protecting fragile ecosystems, until you are in compliance with reducing global greenhouse gas emissions in accordance with protecting the habitability of the planet. And we can only say these things if we have strong leadership from the United States,
Right.
we have strong leadership from China, and we have strong leadership from the United Nations.
Well, we are in dire straits right now, but it's a good message, Tony, even if it's a tough one to see through what's happening now. If it's very difficult, and I do want to. I think I have some comments because we're at that hour and 15-minute mark, and I actually have my helper Brandon coming at 1 o'clock.
No, that's fine. And
It's
I
great.
got a
Yeah.
breakfast I got to
And
get to a little
well,
brunch. So.
okay, he's going to bring firewood up. I can't carry it. But I
Oh,
want
okay.
to do high soul life. Here's one. I'm worried about Zoran being made to fail.
They are absolutely going to go after him with everything you got. And believe me, you have Chuck Schumer up there. You got Hakeem Jeffries up there. They're sitting on their hands. The fact that those men, Jeffries didn't even go to endorse him.
No.
And those people are going to go after him because they want to prove that Zoran Mandani's agenda is ineffective and ineffective leadership. We need to go back to Democrats that don't do anything. So you believe me, that they're going to go after this young man. They're going to go after Zoran Mandani. Okay. And that's why I'm so glad that he's putting together a powerful administration to take them on. And he's going to need to take them on. And he's going to need to expose them to the public in New York, because it's going to take a lot of public pressure to get on these officials. And I'm so glad Kathy Hochul now realized she has to go on the other side of this, the governor of New York.
Yeah,
she was on the other side.
She
was on the other side. And she finally got pushed in the right direction on this. But I'm still a little interested to see where she's going to go.
She's a conservadem. I watch. All right, listen, we're going to do the first toilet flush of the day, Environmental Coffee House toilet flush of the day, and we're going to flush Schumer and Jeffries.
Yes.
Bye-bye. It's time for Chuck Schumer to go, and
we need new leadership.
Yeah, and I would also like to flush Javier Milei in Argentina. Goodbye. He would be another one. Goodbye. He's yeah. I mean, the show is about, or it was started out to be about Argentina, but it really does extrapolate to everything. What happens there is just another, like we started, encapsulation of all the finger pointing, all the nonsense that takes away and distracts from what's really happening, which is the destruction of the planet through global warming, overshoot, and technology in a way. But
yeah.
We've got to.
Unfortunately, we are at the intersectionality of a lot of different things here. But absolutely, and that's why it's so important now to have strong leadership.
Yeah, and we need it. We need it. And it's not hopium. It's the fact that we are still here and there's still a fight. I'll never give up. I mean, I'll never give up. And that's that. And that's why I'm part of this Space TV, the Progressive Solidarity Network, for trying to speak truth to power to other people besides progressives and building.
And you know what? And I've always, I don't want to sound so grim, but in a lot of ways, I'm very thankful that the United States is facing so much international isolation, because if the United States doesn't want to lead and just wants to get in the way and wants to revert backwards, then we should be internationally isolated, okay? And the Trump administration is doing a phenomenal job in isolating us. And I hope the rest of the world sees that, the United States cannot isolate. The United States can't lead on the immigration issue. The United States can't lead on its own education issue. The United States can't lead on the environment issue. The United States can't lead on foreign policy and international relations. The United States can't lead on the Gaza issue. Maybe the United States shouldn't lead in anything. Maybe that's the conclusion the rest of the world should come to. That maybe the United States isn't right for leadership. That maybe the leader is amongst one of them, not us. And if that has to be the way that we move forward, then so be it. Either the United States either lead and be a participant or be completely isolated. But what we can't do is lead the world off a cliff.
Thank you, Nadia. The Democratic Party is like how COINTELPRO made the Communist Party USA in the 50s. It was 2/3 undercover FBI agents. Nadia has the goods on so much. Oh my God.
That's absolutely right.
She's the reader.
Chuck Schumer, Jeffries, these Democrats, Gosheimer, Amy Klobuchar, all of these people.
Time to go.
These people are what we call controlled opposition. Okay, that is their only role, is to control the opposition. Even Amy Klobuchar, I dislike her so much. When we were making finally some progress on the student loan issue, for the first time in her life, she talked about doing something on medical debt. But she only weaponized think about how sick this is. She only weaponized doing something on medical debt to stop progress on student loan debt. Otherwise, she's completely quiet, doesn't care about medical debt. And that's the sort of Democrats that we have to get out of office.
Bingo. And it's also the kind of, we hope the citizens of Argentina and the citizens of all countries of the world will recognize that this has to happen in their countries as well, and fight back against the propaganda and the misinformation and the disinformation that leads to what this whole show started out as, the finger pointing for the events that are happening climatologically and ecologically and environmentally, that it's othering, but it's not othering. Do people start fires? Yes. Are they by accident? Sometimes. Are there crazy people that may do it? Yes. But the othering is what is destroying humanity as well. The hatred. And we know that what Israel has done to the Palestinians in Gaza is horrible. But you cannot fall for taking that experience and pointing to every conspiracy theory about the Jews, just like the indigenous. You cannot, in Argentina, trying to figure point all the indigenous people who have been there for years and generations and generations, that it's them. So we go full circle. Just makes me so emotional because it's always the othering. It's always the hatred. It's what's going to just, and yes, Soul Life, you're right. The Israelis, because but the Israelis, however, the scapegoating is the Jew. And that's because lately right now I am studying the Holocaust by watching all of these Holocaust survivor videos. I've been doing it for weeks. It's been really opening my mind about a lot of things, and it's not defending the actions of Netanyahu and his goons. It's governments. It's misinformation. It's lying to the people all the time. And thank you for that, Foggy. Thank you. I know we can't see it, but it's the hippo going. He's in tactical gear. I wish we could see. Thank you. It helps the channel. Thank you. Yeah. Okay, Tony, now that I made my spiel.
Well, let's move into if we have any questions since we're wrapping it up.
All right.
Yeah, sure.
Let me see what we have. I do have a comment about John. Okay, we're going to leave this planet looking like Mars. John, always nice to see you. Always nice to see John. And then Melanie, the rich want to control amount of slaves and more of what they want without any accountability or consequences for their actions.
And that's why they want AIs, because AIs are the perfect slave robots, because they don't need anything. They don't question. Well, maybe they do. Maybe they do end up killing them. But ideally they would not. Okay. So, we have to fight for the sort of world that we want. And we want a world that's equitable. We want a world that's habitable. We want a world that's safe, has clean air, clean water, has bountiful ecosystems. And that's something that we have to actively fight for, because the billionaire class is not interested in that. The political class is not interested in that. They're interested in their legacies. They're interested in their careers. They're interested in their profit. We have to be interested in the value of humanity and the value of life on this planet.
I think that just about says it. And I have one from Robert. Robert, end times show all kinds of weather. One must know many things to see. Having a good heart is required. Do not lie and do not do things that are wrong. I think that's a good way to end, actually.
Yeah.
Because Robert, we must take the high road. We must love. We must tend to the garden of life. We must not hate. We must not spread misinformation or disinformation. We must understand that we, as progressives, as climate change, you want to say, doomers, you want to say environmentalists, whatever you feel you are, we have to take the right road. We are on the right road. And Antonio, I love you and I thank you so much for everything. Everything you do all the time. All the time.
Thank
You want
you.
to give our little ending spiel.
Thank you. And I love you too, Sandy, really. This has been a magnificent team that we've been going back for over a decade, bringing to you guys the latest, the greatest information on the crisis, how to defend it, how to mitigate it, how to respond to it, and how to love each other and the rest of all the life on this planet. Thank you, guys. Keep Patagonia on your side.
Feel like crying.
Look out for the people in Patagonia. Look out for the people in Argentina. And hopefully we can get these wildfires out of control and bring back a reasonable political regime that will protect the Patagonia. Thank you guys for joining us on this most incredible episode of the Environmental.
Thank you. Bye, everybody.